This veteran and his dog turned a worthless garage into a historic discovery. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Have you ever stumbled upon something that seemed completely worthless, only to discover it was worth more than you could have ever imagined? Well, that's exactly what happened to our hero, a retired veteran, and his loyal dog. This wasn't just a random garage in a rundown neighborhood. It was a place that held secrets, waiting to be uncovered, and the two unlikely adventurers who would find it were about to embark on a journey that would change their lives forever. Our story begins with a man named Jack Lawson. Jack was no stranger to hardship. Having served in the army for over 20 years, he had seen the world through a lens of duty and sacrifice. When he returned home, it wasn't to the warm embrace of family or a community ready to welcome him. Instead, Jack found himself living in the shadows of his past, alone in a small town with nothing but his memories and his dog, Rex, a German shepherd who had been by his side through thick and thin. Jack had always believed in hard work, so when he saw an ad for a cheap rental property, a dilapidated garage on the outskirts of town, he decided to take it. The garage, or what was left of it, was nothing more than a roof over his head. The walls were covered in cracks, the door barely hung on its hinges, and the floor was covered in layers of dust and forgotten tools. It seemed like the kind of place where dreams went to die, a forgotten relic of a time long past. But to Jack, it was a place to start over. Rex, his ever-loyal companion, seemed to sense the same thing. While Jack started cleaning up, Rex wandered around the garage, sniffing every corner, his instincts kicking into high gear. It was then that Jack noticed something strange. The floor in one corner of the garage was oddly uneven, as if there was something beneath it. Curiosity piqued. Jack grabbed a crowbar from the pile of old tools and began to pry up the wooden boards. What he uncovered was shocking. Beneath the rotting floorboards was a hidden compartment, one that had clearly been sealed off for years. Jack's heart raced as he knelt down, brushing away the dirt and dust. Inside the compartment lay an old, rusty chest, its lock barely visible beneath the layers of grime. Jack hesitated for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, he managed to break the lock open. The chest creaked as it revealed its contents, a collection of dusty papers, old photographs, and strange, unfamiliar objects that looked like they belonged in a museum. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ignite a spark of curiosity in Jack. Little did he know, these items would set him on a path that would change his life and uncover a hidden history that had been forgotten by time. The first clue came in the form of a small, weathered letter tucked inside an envelope. The letter was dated back to the 1940s, during World War II, and addressed to a man named James Walker. As Jack read the letter aloud, Rex sat beside him, his eyes scanning the room, alert to the mystery unfolding. The letter spoke of a secret buried deep within the garage, a treasure that had been hidden for decades, waiting for the right person to find it. But the letter didn't stop there. It mentioned a series of cryptic symbols and a map, one that could lead to something far more valuable than Jack had ever imagined. The discovery sent a thrill through Jack's veins. What had he found? What did it all mean? And more importantly, what was he going to do with it? He had no answers, but he knew one thing for sure. His life was about to change. With Rex by his side, Jack set out to unravel the mystery of the garage, and in doing so, he would uncover a historic discovery that had been waiting for the right person to find it. As Jack carefully examined the old letter, his mind raced with questions. What was this treasure hidden in the garage? Who was James Walker, and what did these cryptic symbols mean? Jack's hands trembled slightly as he placed the letter back in the chest, his thoughts spinning. Rex, as always, stayed close by, his ears alert, watching Jack's every move. Jack could feel a connection with the dog that went beyond words, like Rex knew that something significant was unfolding, something that was going to change their lives forever. Jack stood up, pacing the room, trying to make sense of what he had just uncovered. He walked over to the pile of photographs that had been tucked away in the chest, carefully sifting through them. There were black and white images of a man, James Walker, he presumed, standing proudly in front of what appeared to be the very garage he was now occupying. In the background of one photo, Jack noticed something peculiar. A large, overgrown tree stood in the yard, its branches twisted in unnatural directions. It was hard to tell, but it looked as though the tree had been planted in a specific spot. The photos seemed to suggest that the man in the pictures had once lived here, but what had happened to him? And why had he hidden this treasure? Jack sat back down on the floor, staring at the image for a long time. There had to be a reason this was all buried. Rex let out a low growl, and Jack looked up to see the dog staring intently at one corner of the garage. Jack followed his gaze, but there was nothing there. Or so it seemed. The silence in the room was thick, and Jack's instincts kicked in. There was something else in this room, something just beyond his reach, something Rex had sensed long before he did. Jack stood up slowly and moved toward the corner of the garage. He knelt down, running his hand along the floorboards. There it was again, the slight shift in the wood, the same sensation he had felt earlier when he uncovered the hidden compartment. This part of the floor was loose, but not in a way that suggested age. It felt deliberate, like someone had planned for this moment. Jack's heart raced as he reached for the crowbar he had used earlier. He pried up the floorboards once again, this time with more urgency. Beneath them, there was another compartment, larger than the first, and this one was definitely not a mistake. As Jack removed the last of the planks, he found a dusty old chest, much larger than the first. It was clearly very old, and its metal clasps had rusted over the years. But Jack could see something written on it, an inscription in faded letters. The key to your future lies beneath. Jack's pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. The chest was too significant, too carefully hidden. It was as if whoever had buried it had left this message for the right person to find. And now, that person was Jack. He hesitated for only a moment before using the crowbar to pry open the chest. Inside, the contents were a jumble of old papers, military records, and what appeared to be a map, a detailed map of the local area, with markings that seemed to point to a specific location deep in the woods, miles from the town. Jack's eyes widened as he studied the map. It was clear that this was no ordinary treasure hunt. This was something bigger. The map seemed to lead to a remote area that Jack had never noticed before. The markings on the map were precise, with coordinates that appeared to be drawn with the same care as the inscriptions on the chest. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of destiny, as if everything in his life had led him to this moment. Rex, sensing his excitement, began to whine softly. Jack scratched the dog's head, his mind racing. Could this be the beginning of something extraordinary? Jack stood up, gripping the map tightly in his hand. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows of the garage, but Jack felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over him. He had no idea what he would find at the end of this journey, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back now. Rex barked, as if urging him on. Jack smiled, his eyes filled with determination. It was time to see what lay beyond the map, beyond the garage, and beyond the secrets that had been hidden for so long. Jack and Rex were about to embark on an adventure that would change their lives and uncover a historic discovery that had been buried for decades. As Jack left the garage, the rain stopped, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the brink of something life-changing. Jack stood at the edge of the garage, his eyes locked on the map in his hand. The cold wind had stopped, but the uncertainty lingered, filling the air around him with a palpable tension. Rex, ever faithful, stood by his side, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. For a moment, Jack simply stared at the map, studying the markings and coordinates that pointed deep into the woods. There was no turning back now. He had to know what lay at the end of this journey, what secrets had been hidden for so long. With a determined sigh, Jack folded the map carefully and tucked it into his jacket. Rex let out a soft bark, as if giving him the final nudge he needed. Together, they began walking toward the edge of town, the silence between them filled only by the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. As they moved through the streets, Jack couldn't help but notice how deserted everything seemed. The town felt distant, as if he were already stepping into another world. The world of the past. The world of forgotten mysteries. The road leading out of town narrowed, flanked by dense trees that seemed to reach out toward them, casting long shadows in the fading light. It was almost as if the woods themselves were alive, watching Jack and Rex as they passed. Jack had walked these paths before, but tonight, everything felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and the weight of the journey ahead pressed down on him. Rex led the way, his keen senses alert to every rustle in the underbrush, every movement in the trees. As the two ventured deeper into the woods, the surroundings grew darker, the sounds of the town fading away. The only noise now was the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The sense of mystery grew stronger with each step. It wasn't long before they reached the clearing marked on the map, a place Jack had never been before. The trees parted, revealing a large, flat rock that seemed to have been placed deliberately in the center of the clearing. The map had marked this spot with a circle, but there was no indication of what Jack was supposed to find here. He approached the rock cautiously, his hand resting on the hilt of the knife he had brought with him, just in case. Rex sat down beside him, staring intently at the rock. It was then that Jack noticed something peculiar. The rock had an engraving, faint but still visible in the fading light. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the chest in the garage, the same symbol that had been on the letter. Jack knelt down, brushing away the dirt and leaves that had accumulated over the years. The engraving was of a spiral, intricately carved into the stone, with lines that seemed to lead toward the center. As Jack traced the design with his fingers, a low rumble seemed to come from beneath the earth, vibrating through the ground. Rex immediately stood, his hackles raised. Jack felt his heart race. The earth beneath them seemed to shift, as if responding to the symbol. There was a deep, resonating hum, almost like a heartbeat. Jack could feel it in his chest. The ground trembled slightly, and then, just as suddenly as it began, the rumbling stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew it was no coincidence. This was part of something bigger. This was why the garage had been left behind, why the chest had been hidden, why the letter had been written. Jack stepped back, looking around the clearing for any sign of what might come next. He felt a strange sense of urgency. Whatever was meant to happen here was about to unfold. And then, it appeared. A hidden compartment in the ground, just to the side of the rock, began to rise. The earth shifted, and a stone slab slowly emerged, revealing a set of metal stairs leading down into the darkness below. Rex barked again, his voice sharp with excitement, as if urging Jack to move. Without hesitation, Jack approached the stairs, his pulse quickening. The stairs were old, worn by time, but still sturdy. The air that greeted him as he descended was cool, almost cold, with a faint smell of earth and metal. Jack felt as though he were stepping into another world entirely, one that had been forgotten by time. At the bottom of the stairs, Jack found a large wooden door, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust. The door was old, but it didn't look abandoned. It looked as though it had been waiting for someone to open it. Jack reached for the handle, his hand trembling slightly. He turned it, and the door creaked open, revealing a small room. Inside, the room was filled with shelves, each one stacked with old books, papers, and strange artifacts. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and wood, and the room felt strangely familiar. Jack stepped inside, his eyes scanning the shelves. And then he saw it. A large, leather-bound book sat on a pedestal in the center of the room, its pages yellowed with age. Jack approached it carefully, his heart racing. He had no idea what this book contained, but he knew it was the key to everything. As he opened the book, a wave of revelation hit him. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the missing link to the mystery that had started with the garage and the map. The book was filled with details of an ancient secret, one that had been hidden away for centuries, waiting for the right person to uncover it. Jack's hand trembled as he turned the pages, his mind reeling with the weight of the discovery. Rex stood by his side, his eyes fixed on the book as if understanding the significance of the moment. This was no longer just a journey for treasure. It was a journey that would change the course of history, and it was only just beginning. As Jack stood there, holding the leather-bound book, the weight of the discovery began to sink in. It wasn't just a book, this was a key to something ancient, something hidden away for centuries. The room, once silent, now seemed to hum with energy, as if the walls themselves were waiting for him to make the next move. Rex, who had been sitting patiently by his side, now stood up, his body tense, his amber eyes locked on the book. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. It was as if the dog sensed the importance of the moment. Jack carefully turned the pages, each one revealing more details about the long-forgotten secret. The book spoke of a hidden society, a group of individuals who had lived in the shadows, guarding knowledge and treasures that could change the world. They had been tasked with protecting these secrets for generations, but over time, they had disappeared, leaving behind only traces of their existence. The final chapter of the book, however, was the most puzzling. It contained a map, an old, hand-drawn map of the area surrounding Jack's garage, with an X marking a spot deep in the woods. The coordinates were eerily familiar, matching those from the map he had found earlier. This was the final step. Jack's heart raced as he realized that the treasure he had been seeking was closer than ever. But there was something else in the book, something that made his stomach tighten. A warning. The treasure was not meant to be found. The guardians of the secret had left behind clues, but they had also made sure that only the worthy would ever discover them. The final message in the book read, "The path to the treasure is fraught with danger. Only the pure of heart can endure the trials that lie ahead." Jack stared at the words, a sense of unease settling over him. What did this mean? What trials awaited him? And what did it mean to be pure of heart? Was he truly worthy of this discovery? Rex let out a low growl, snapping Jack from his thoughts. He turned to the dog, whose gaze was fixed on the corner of the room, the spot where the door had creaked open. Something had shifted in the atmosphere, and Jack could feel it too. He wasn't alone anymore. Jack slowly closed the book, his mind racing with questions, but he knew he had no choice but to follow the map. The treasure was within his reach, and with Rex by his side, he wasn't going to back down now. He packed the book and map into his backpack and made his way back up the stairs, the creaking sound of the door echoing in the stillness. As he stepped back into the clearing, the weight of the decision hit him. There was no turning back. The world had just shifted, and Jack was standing at the center of it all. Rex barked once, sharply, as if urging Jack to move forward. Jack nodded, his resolve hardening. The treasure was waiting, but so were the dangers. As they made their way back through the woods, the once quiet forest now seemed full of hidden eyes, watching their every move. The air was thick with tension, and Jack's steps quickened as he felt the presence of something ancient, something that had been lying dormant for centuries. The map led them deeper into the woods, and with each step, the trees grew denser, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Jack's pulse quickened as they approached the marked spot. The ground beneath them was soft, almost spongy, as if it had been untouched for years. Rex, always alert, suddenly stopped, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Jack paused, his heart pounding in his chest. Something was off. Rex's eyes were fixed on a particular spot in the ground, and Jack followed his gaze. There, partially buried in the earth, was a large stone. It was smooth, almost polished, and it seemed out of place in the otherwise wild terrain. Jack knelt down, brushing away the dirt with his hands. As he did, the stone shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. His breath caught in his throat. The treasure was here. But as Jack reached for the compartment, something strange happened. The ground beneath them rumbled again, the same low hum he had felt back at the garage. Rex growled, backing away, but Jack's curiosity pushed him forward. He opened the compartment, his hands trembling. Inside, there was a small, ornate box, its surface engraved with the same spiral symbol that had appeared on the rock in the clearing. Jack's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The treasure. He carefully lifted the box from its resting place, and as soon as he did, the rumbling stopped. The air grew still, almost suffocating in its silence. Jack stood up, clutching the box in his hands. The journey had led him here, to this moment. But as he turned to leave, a shadow crossed his path. He wasn't alone. Jack froze in place, the ornate box clutched tightly in his hands, his breath shallow as he scanned the darkening forest around him. Rex was the first to react, growling low, his fur bristling as he stood protectively by Jack's side. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he instinctively stepped back, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The woods had grown unervingly quiet. The usual sounds of rustling leaves, chirping birds, and the wind in the trees had ceased. A stillness, almost suffocating in its intensity, had settled over the clearing. Jack had felt this before, that familiar sensation of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the reach of the visible. His instincts, honed by years of service and survival, screamed at him to remain alert. Rex's growl grew louder, and Jack followed the dog's gaze. From the edge of the clearing, a figure emerged from the trees. At first, Jack thought it was another traveler, but as the figure drew closer, his stomach dropped. The man was tall, dressed in dark, tattered clothing, his face obscured by the hood of his cloak. He moved with a quiet, unsettling grace, his steps deliberate and unhurried. Jack's hand instinctively tightened around the box, his mind racing for a plan. He had no idea who this man was, but something about him didn't feel right. The stranger stopped just at the edge of the clearing, his dark eyes glinting in the fading light. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the wind stirring through the trees. Then, the man spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "I see you found it." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Jack didn't respond at first, his mind working furiously. Who was this man? How did he know about the treasure? And what did he want? Rex continued to growl, his eyes fixed on the stranger. The man's gaze flickered to the dog, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Your companion is very protective," the man said, his voice carrying a strange amusement. "But it won't be enough." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. The man's words were cryptic, his tone eerily calm, but there was an edge to them that made Jack's skin crawl. Jack finally found his voice. "Who are you?" The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. "Someone who has been waiting," he said. "Waiting for the right person to find it. Waiting for the right person to make the discovery. You. Jack Lawson, is it?" Jack's heart skipped a beat. How did this man know his name? His grip on the box tightened, and Rex growled louder, sensing Jack's tension. "You've been following me," Jack said, his voice sharp with suspicion. The man's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I've been watching," he said, stepping closer, his movements slow and deliberate. "But it's not just you I've been waiting for." Jack took a step back, his senses heightened, every nerve on edge. The man's presence felt like a shadow creeping over him, and Jack instinctively felt that the stranger knew far more than he was letting on. "What do you want?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "What is this all about?" The man paused for a moment, his dark eyes locking onto Jack's with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "The treasure you've found," he said softly, his voice like a whisper carried on the wind, "is only the beginning. It was meant to be uncovered, but not by you. Not yet." Jack's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" The stranger's smile faded, and his expression became more serious, almost somber. "The treasure you hold in your hands. It is part of something much larger. Something much older. The guardians of the secret, they didn't just hide it away. They hid something far more dangerous, something that could change everything. And now, it's up to you to decide what happens next." Jack's mind was spinning. Danger? Guardians? What had he gotten himself into? He had come here to uncover a long-lost secret, not to be caught in some kind of ancient game with stakes he didn't understand. The man took another step forward, his eyes still fixed on Jack's. "I'm here to make sure you don't make the wrong choice," he said, his voice colder now, as if the warmth had drained out of it. "Because if you do, the consequences will be irreversible." Jack felt a surge of anger rise within him. He wasn't going to be intimidated. "You don't get to tell me what to do," Jack said, his voice firm. "I've come this far, and I'm going to see this through." The stranger's eyes flickered with something like amusement, but his lips didn't curl into a smile. "So be it," he said, his tone final. "But remember this, Jack Lawson. There are forces in this world far more powerful than you can imagine. And when you're standing at the crossroads, you'll have to choose carefully." With that, the man turned and began to walk back into the woods, disappearing into the shadows with the same eerie quietness that had marked his arrival. Jack stood there for a long moment, his mind racing, his heart still pounding in his chest. Rex's growl had quieted, but the unease lingered, thick in the air. Who was that man? What did he know about the treasure? And what choice had Jack really made? The answers felt just out of reach, slipping through his fingers like sand. Jack took a deep breath and looked down at the box in his hands. Whatever lay ahead, whatever secrets were buried in the earth, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't backing down now. Jack stood in the clearing, the weight of the box still heavy in his hands. The stranger's words echoed in his mind, each one carrying a sense of urgency, a warning that Jack couldn't shake. There are forces in this world far more powerful than you can imagine. Jack had always believed in his own strength, his ability to push through adversity, but now, doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. What was he really up against? And why had this stranger appeared now, just as Jack was on the brink of uncovering something monumental? Rex, sensing Jack's unease, nudged his leg, snapping him out of his thoughts. Jack looked down at his loyal companion, who gazed up at him with trusting eyes. For a moment, Jack felt a strange sense of comfort. He wasn't alone. He couldn't afford to let fear control him now. He had come too far. With renewed determination, Jack started walking again, the map still clutched tightly in his other hand. The trees around him seemed to grow darker, the shadows longer, as if the forest itself was pulling him deeper into its secrets. Rex stayed by his side, his presence a steadying force. They followed the winding path indicated on the map, the landscape becoming increasingly unfamiliar. The ground beneath their feet grew uneven, the terrain shifting from soft earth to rocky paths. Jack's breath quickened as they approached a dense thicket. Something about this place felt different. It was as though the air was thicker here, heavier, charged with an energy that Jack couldn't quite explain. As they moved through the underbrush, Jack's senses heightened. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the leaves seemed amplified. He wasn't sure if it was his mind playing tricks on him or if the forest itself was alive, but he felt like something was watching them, following their every move. Rex stopped suddenly, his ears perked up, his nose twitching. Jack's pulse raced. The dog had sensed something. Jack crouched down, motioning for Rex to stay. He listened carefully, straining to hear any sounds that might indicate danger. For a moment, there was nothing. But then, in the distance, he heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like footsteps, but too deliberate, too heavy to be human. Jack's heart skipped a beat. What was that sound? He looked around, trying to pinpoint the source, but the trees seemed to close in on him, blocking his view. Rex growled low, his stance protective, and Jack knew that whatever was out there, it wasn't something friendly. He reached for the small knife he had tucked into his belt, just in case. Slowly, Jack and Rex crept forward, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the dense foliage. The tapping grew louder, closer. Jack's breath caught in his throat. And then, through the thick trees, he saw it. A figure, tall and cloaked, moving slowly through the undergrowth. Jack's stomach churned as he realized that this wasn't the same stranger from earlier. This was someone, or something, different. The figure moved with an eerie precision, its steps calculated and slow, as if it were waiting for Jack to make a move. Jack's grip tightened around his knife. He wasn't sure what he was facing, but he knew it was time to confront whatever had been lurking in the shadows. "Who are you?" Jack called out, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. The figure stopped, its head turning toward Jack. There was no face, just an empty hood, darkness spilling from it like smoke. Jack's heart raced as the figure spoke, its voice low and cold, carrying an unnatural echo. "You've come far, Jack Lawson," it said, its voice reverberating in the quiet of the woods. "But you've come too late." Jack's mind spun. Too late for what? He demanded. The figure didn't answer immediately, but instead took a slow step forward. Jack tensed, his body coiled like a spring, ready to react. "The treasure you seek," the figure continued, "is not yours to claim. It was never meant to be found by someone like you." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Someone like me? What does that mean?" The figure tilted its head slightly, a gesture that felt almost thoughtful. "You think you are the one destined to uncover the secrets of this land, to wield the power that lies buried here," it said. "But the power is not meant for you. Not yet." Jack took a step forward, his pulse pounding in his ears. "I've come this far, and I'm not turning back now. If you're trying to stop me, you'll have to do more than just talk." The figure was silent for a moment before it spoke again, its voice now tinged with something like pity. "You misunderstand, Jack Lawson. I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to guide you." Jack felt a flicker of confusion. "Guide me? You're the one who's been watching me, following me." The figure nodded slowly. "I have been watching, yes. But I am not your enemy." It reached into the folds of its cloak and produced a small, stone-like object. It was shaped like a key, though its surface was covered in intricate runes that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The figure extended the key toward Jack. "Take this," it said. "It is your true test. Only by using it will you understand the path that lies ahead." Jack hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to refuse. But something about the key, something about the way it shimmered in the figure's hand, drew him in. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out and took the key. As soon as his fingers brushed against it, the ground beneath him shifted again, a deep rumble that seemed to come from the very earth. Rex barked sharply, and Jack could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The figure's voice was the last thing Jack heard before the world around him seemed to crumble away. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." As Jack stood there, holding the strange stone key, he could feel the weight of the moment press in on him like a storm about to break. The earth beneath his feet seemed to hum, vibrating with an energy that felt as if it had been dormant for centuries. Rex, standing beside him, growled low, his fur bristling with tension. The figure in front of Jack had vanished into the woods, but the ominous sense of something ancient and powerful lingered, hanging thick in the air. Jack's hand trembled slightly as he turned the key over in his palm, examining it more closely. The runes etched into the stone seemed to shift and shimmer as if they were alive, pulsating with an eerie glow. The figure's words echoed in his mind. "Only by using it will you understand the path that lies ahead." But what did that mean? Was he really ready to face whatever lay at the end of this journey? The decision gnawed at him, but Jack had come too far to turn back now. With Rex at his side, he steeled himself for what was to come. Without fully understanding why, Jack began walking towards the deepest part of the woods, following the path that the figure had pointed him towards. As they walked, the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches twisting into strange shapes, as if the forest itself was alive, watching. The air grew colder, and the sun seemed to set faster than usual, casting long, unnatural shadows that stretched across the ground. Jack's pulse quickened. The further he went, the more intense the sensation of being followed grew. His instincts screamed that something was lurking just out of sight, something ancient and waiting. Suddenly, Rex stopped dead in his tracks, his ears pricked up, and his body tensed. Jack froze, instinctively looking around. The woods were silent, save for the sound of Rex's low growl. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he realized what was happening. It was the same feeling he had experienced when the stranger had appeared. When he first entered the garage, something was coming. Something dangerous. Before he could react, a shadow moved quickly in the corner of his vision. Jack whipped around, his hand going to the knife at his side. Rex barked, but there was no sound of footsteps, no sign of any intruder. The forest stood still, and the air felt thick with anticipation. It was then that Jack heard the whisper, a faint, nearly inaudible voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You should have stayed away," the voice said, cold and menacing. Jack's blood ran cold as the voice continued, the words slowly becoming clearer, though the speaker remained unseen. "The treasure you seek is not meant for you, Jack Lawson. It was never meant to be found by someone like you." Jack's grip on the key tightened. His heart pounded in his chest, the fear creeping up his spine. "Who are you?" Jack demanded, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to remain calm. The whisper grew louder, the voice coming from all directions now. "I am the guardian of the secret, the one who watches over the path you walk, and I will not allow you to disturb what has been hidden for centuries." Jack felt his anger rising. "I've come this far," he said firmly. "I'm not turning back now. If you want to stop me, you'll have to do more than just talk." There was a pause, and for a moment, Jack thought the voice had gone silent. But then, the whisper returned, this time louder, more forceful. "You have no idea what you're unleashing," the voice hissed. "The power that lies within the treasure is beyond your understanding. You think you are ready to wield it, but you are just a pawn in a game much older than you can comprehend." Jack felt a cold chill run down his spine. His mind raced with the implications of the voice's words. What game was the voice talking about? What was the treasure really? And why was he being warned away from it? As Jack stood there, battling the fear rising in his chest, Rex growled louder, his body tense, ready to spring. Jack knew they weren't alone anymore. The sense of danger had grown, and whatever it wasn't just in his head. Something was coming. Jack's grip on the key tightened as the shadows around him seemed to move, shifting in the corner of his vision. The trees groaned as if bending under the weight of something unseen, and the very earth beneath his feet seemed to tremble. Rex barked again, more urgently this time, and Jack quickly turned to face the direction the dog was looking. Through the trees, in the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows. This time, Jack could see him clearly. It was the stranger, the one who had spoken to him earlier. But now, there was something different about him. The figure's eyes were glowing with a cold, blue light, and his expression was dark, filled with an unsettling calm. He didn't speak right away, but simply walked toward Jack, his movements slow and deliberate. The closer he got, the more the air seemed to thicken. Jack felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders like a physical force. The figure stopped just a few feet away, his eyes locked on Jack's. "You should have stayed away," the stranger repeated, his voice like ice. "But now that you've found it, there is no turning back." Jack stood his ground, his mind racing for a solution, but his body was ready. Rex stood at his side, every muscle coiled, ready to protect him. The figure's gaze shifted to the key in Jack's hand. "That key," he said, his voice almost a whisper, "it is not what you think it is. And now, you are bound to it." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The key was more than just a piece of ancient history. It was a symbol of something far more powerful, something Jack had yet to fully understand. He knew one thing for sure. He was in deeper than he could have ever imagined. The figure stood before Jack, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light, the intensity of his gaze enough to make the air feel thick with tension. Jack's heart raced as he gripped the key tighter in his hand, the cool stone now feeling heavy with the weight of the secrets it carried. Rex, ever loyal, stood alert by Jack's side, his growl soft but constant, a reminder that Jack was not facing this alone. But the figure before him was different from any man Jack had encountered. He was more than just a stranger in the woods. He was a presence, something older than Jack could understand, something that had been waiting, watching, perhaps for centuries. "You found the key, Jack Lawson," the figure said, his voice cold and distant, but there was a slight flicker of approval in his eyes. "But this is just the beginning. The path ahead will test you in ways you cannot imagine." Jack swallowed hard, his mind racing with questions. "Test me? What do you mean by that? What is this all about?" The figure took a slow step forward, his face still hidden beneath the hood, only his glowing eyes visible. "The key you hold has unlocked the door to something far greater than you can comprehend," he said, his voice low but filled with a strange authority. "It is not just a treasure you seek. It is a power, a force that has been hidden from the world for centuries. And now, you are the one chosen to unleash it." Jack's head spun. "Unleash it? I don't want any part of this power. I just want to know the truth. What's the treasure? What is all this?" The figure's eyes flashed, and for a brief moment, Jack thought he saw something akin to pity in them. "The treasure is not what you think it is. It is not gold, or jewels, or riches. It is knowledge, Jack. Knowledge that could change the course of history. Knowledge that could destroy the world if it falls into the wrong hands." Jack's stomach tightened. "What do you mean by destroy the world?" The figure let out a soft laugh, but it held no humor, only the weight of centuries of experience. "You believe you understand the stakes, but you do not. This knowledge was sealed away for a reason. Those who came before you knew the consequences of unleashing it, and so they hid it, buried it deep beneath the earth, guarded by those who understood its power." Jack took a step back, trying to process what the figure was saying. "So, this power, this knowledge, it's dangerous?" "More than you can imagine," the figure replied, his voice a low whisper, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "And now, it is in your hands. You must decide whether to use it, or destroy it once and for all." Jack's mind raced. The weight of the decision before him was overwhelming. How could he be the one to decide something so important? He had come here searching for answers, not to become a keeper of some world-altering power. He had wanted peace, not this. "I didn't ask for this," Jack said, his voice shaking with frustration. "I just wanted to know what happened to the people who left these clues. I wanted to know the truth." The figure's eyes softened, just for a moment, before hardening again. "The truth, Jack Lawson, is a dangerous thing. Some truths are meant to be buried, and some people are never meant to uncover them." Rex barked, sensing Jack's rising anxiety, and Jack took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would define everything that had come before. "So what now?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. The figure stepped back, his cloak rustling with an almost ethereal sound. "Now, you face the trials," he said, his voice a solemn echo. "The treasure you seek, the power you have unlocked. It comes at a cost. You must prove yourself worthy, or you will fall just like those who came before you." Jack felt the ground beneath him shift, and for a moment, he thought the forest itself had come alive, responding to the figure's words. The trees groaned, and the wind picked up, howling through the branches. Rex barked again, a sharp, urgent sound that made Jack's heart race. The figure turned away, his movements fluid and swift. "You have no choice now, Jack. The path you've chosen cannot be undone. Come, follow me." Jack's heart pounded as he followed the figure into the dense forest, the path growing narrower with each step. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches twisting and reaching out like hands eager to pull them deeper into the shadows. The air grew colder, the wind colder still, as if they were descending into some forgotten underworld. Jack's thoughts raced, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back. Whatever lay ahead would force him to confront the truth, and he had no idea if he was ready for it. But Rex, always by his side, seemed to know what to do. His eyes never wavered, his ears alert, his body moving with purpose. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of reassurance. No matter what happened, he was not alone. The trials had begun. Jack followed the figure deeper into the forest, the path narrowing as they moved farther from the clearing. The trees here seemed to grow taller, their trunks twisting into strange shapes that seemed to reach out and grab at the air. Rex moved ahead of Jack, his body low and alert, eyes scanning the shadows, his fur bristling with every step. The silence was unnerving. The usual sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the distant chirp of birds, the buzzing of insects, had vanished. Only the wind moved, carrying the scent of pine and earth, but even it felt heavy, as if the woods were holding its breath. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The figure, who led them through the dense underbrush, moved with eerie precision, never looking back. It was as if he knew exactly where he was going, like the forest itself was guiding him. Jack's mind raced with questions, but he kept them to himself. Whoever this person was, he had to trust him for now. The key in Jack's pocket seemed to burn with energy, as if it were alive, reacting to the very presence of the forest. Jack didn't know what the figure meant when he said the key was part of something bigger, something that could change everything, but he felt it now, in the air around him. He felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. They walked for what seemed like hours, the sun barely visible through the thick canopy above. The deeper they went, the more unnatural the forest became. The trees grew denser, their trunks larger, their roots twisted and sprawling across the ground. Jack stumbled once, his foot catching on a root, but Rex was there, nipping at his heel as if to keep him steady. Jack's eyes narrowed as he glanced up at the figure, his pace never faltering. The man had not said a word since they had entered the woods. But Jack didn't dare break the silence. It wasn't just the woods that felt off, it was the figure himself. There was something about him, his calm, his certainty, that felt out of place, as though he wasn't entirely human. They stopped suddenly. The figure held up a hand, signaling for Jack to do the same. Jack's breath quickened as he strained his ears, trying to listen for whatever the figure had heard. A faint sound echoed through the trees. It was distant, almost like a whisper. But it wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something that made the hairs on the back of Jack's neck stand up. The figure turned to Jack, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "We're close," he said softly. Jack's heart raced, and for the first time, he felt a sense of urgency. He wasn't sure what was waiting ahead, but something told him that he had crossed a line, and there would be no turning back from what was to come. The figure led him forward, his steps confident, as if he knew exactly where they were going. Jack's mind raced. He had been searching for answers for so long, but now, he was afraid of what those answers might bring. The key he carried, he didn't know its true power, didn't understand what it could unlock, but something deep inside him told him that it was about to change everything. As they moved through the forest, the trees parted, revealing a clearing ahead. Jack's breath caught in his throat as they stepped into the open space. In the center of the clearing was a massive stone structure, half buried in the earth, its surface covered with moss and vines. It looked ancient, like it had been there for centuries, untouched by time. The air around it felt thick, heavy with something Jack couldn't quite name. The figure stepped forward, moving toward the structure without hesitation. Jack followed, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approached, the key in his pocket began to hum, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to resonate with the stone. He stopped, a wave of realization washing over him. This was it. This was what he had been searching for. The figure turned to Jack, his expression unreadable. "This is where the trials begin," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "The key you carry is the key to unlocking what lies beneath. But be warned. Only the worthy will survive what comes next." Jack's stomach churned as he stepped forward, the stone structure looming before him. Rex stayed close by his side, his fur bristling with unease. Jack felt the weight of the moment. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He was no longer just a man searching for answers. He was part of something much bigger, something that could change the course of history. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing the key. The hum grew louder, resonating through his bones. It was calling to him, urging him to move forward. Jack took a deep breath, knowing that whatever happened next would alter his life forever. He stepped toward the structure, Rex by his side, and placed the key into a crack in the stone. The key slid easily into place, and with a soft click, the earth trembled beneath his feet. The ground around them shook, the stones shifting and moving as if they were alive. Jack's eyes widened as the stone structure began to open, revealing a hidden passage leading deep into the earth. The journey had only just begun, and Jack knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. The stone door groaned as it shifted open, revealing a darkened passageway that seemed to extend deep into the earth. Jack stood frozen for a moment, the hum of the key still vibrating in his hand. Rex, sensing the tension in the air, stepped forward cautiously, his ears perked and his eyes scanning the shadows ahead. Jack followed, taking a deep breath as he steeled himself for whatever lay beyond the stone threshold. The air was thick with an ancient energy, the kind of energy that made Jack feel both small and powerful at the same time. As they moved further into the passage, the temperature dropped, and the darkness closed in around them. Jack could barely make out the outlines of the walls, but he could feel the weight of history pressing against him, like the very walls were alive, watching, waiting. He reached for his flashlight, the beam of light cutting through the darkness in front of him, revealing walls that seemed to be carved from solid rock. The same runes that had been etched into the key now appeared on the walls, glowing faintly, guiding them forward. Each step they took echoed in the silence, the only sound coming from their footsteps and Rex's soft breathing. Jack's mind raced. What had he uncovered? What had he been chosen for? The figure had spoken of trials, but what did they entail? He had no idea what he was about to face, but he couldn't turn back now. The path ahead was narrow, the walls closing in as they moved deeper underground. The air grew heavier, and the faint glow from the runes on the walls seemed to pulse with each step, as if reacting to their presence. Jack's senses were on high alert, every nerve in his body screaming that something was about to happen. And then, just as they reached the end of the narrow passage, the walls opened up into a vast chamber, far larger than Jack had imagined. The space was illuminated by an eerie, otherworldly light, coming from a source that Jack couldn't see. The floor was covered in ancient symbols, and in the center of the room stood a massive stone pedestal, covered in dust and cobwebs. Atop the pedestal rested an object, wrapped in cloth. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he stepped forward, his heart pounding. The object on the pedestal seemed to call to him, the energy around it, humming with an undeniable pull. He reached out with trembling hands and slowly removed the cloth. Beneath it was a crystal, glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The crystal was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own, casting strange shadows on the walls of the chamber. Rex stepped forward, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the crystal. Jack could feel the dog's unease, the same unease that gripped him. The crystal radiated an intense energy, one that felt both welcoming and dangerous at the same time. "This is it," Jack whispered to himself, barely able to believe what he was seeing. The treasure he had sought was not gold, not jewels, but something far more powerful. The crystal seemed to hum in his hands, its glow growing brighter as he held it. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook. Jack stumbled, nearly losing his balance. Rex barked, his growl deepening as the floor trembled beneath their feet. The walls of the chamber began to shift, the ancient symbols on the floor lighting up one by one, as if activating something deep within the earth. The crystal in Jack's hands grew hotter, its pulse quickening with every passing second. Jack looked around, his mind racing. What was happening? Was this the trial the figure had spoken of? The chamber began to glow, the light from the crystal now filling the entire room, making the walls shimmer with an unnatural brilliance. The energy was overwhelming, suffocating, and Jack felt as though the very room was closing in on him. What is this? Jack asked aloud, but there was no answer. The air grew thick, almost tangible, as if the space around him was warping. Rex barked again, his hackles raised as the ground trembled once more. Jack looked at the crystal in his hands, his eyes wide with fear. What do I do with this? The crystal's glow grew brighter, the pulse intensifying, and Jack felt the ground shift again, this time violently. The walls of the chamber cracked, and a deep rumbling echoed through the stone. The crystal's light was blinding now, its pulse vibrating through Jack's entire body, as if it were connected to his very soul. Jack's heart raced as the rumbling grew louder, and he realized with horror that the chamber was beginning to collapse. The energy in the air was building to a crescendo, and Jack knew he had only moments to make a choice. With a burst of adrenaline, Jack turned and ran, the crystal still clutched tightly in his hands. Rex followed closely behind, his paws thudding on the stone floor as they sprinted toward the exit. The passageway was now a blur of light and shadow, and Jack's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and fears. Was it too late to stop what he had unleashed? The rumbling grew louder, and the walls of the chamber cracked further, dust and debris falling around them. Jack's breath was ragged, his chest tight with fear as they reached the narrow passage. The exit was close, but the ground beneath them was shaking violently now. Jack could feel the walls closing in, the stones shifting as if the earth itself was trying to swallow them whole. Rex barked ahead, his eyes fixed on the faint light of the exit. Jack pushed forward, his legs burning with exhaustion, but the crystal's power was pulling him forward, guiding him toward the way out. Just as the ground shook with one final violent tremor, Jack and Rex emerged into the open air, the sound of the rumbling echoing behind them. They stood there, gasping for breath, the forest around them eerily still. The chamber had collapsed, the energy from the crystal now dissipating into the air. Jack looked down at the crystal, still glowing faintly in his hand. The weight of what had just happened hit him all at once. The crystal was more than just a treasure. It was a key, a force that had the power to change everything. Jack knew then that this was only the beginning. The quiet of the forest felt unnerving after the chaos that had just unfolded. Jack stood there, the crystal still glowing faintly in his hand, as if it had a life of its own. The ground around him had settled, and the rumbling had stopped, but the tension in the air remained thick, a reminder of the power that had just been unleashed. Rex stood beside him, his fur bristling, eyes scanning the area as if waiting for something to happen. Jack's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to process everything that had just transpired. The crystal's power, the collapse of the chamber, the strange figure that had guided him, and the warning of trials yet to come. They all swirled in his mind like a storm he couldn't control. He felt a deep sense of unease, but he also felt something else, a sense of purpose. He had been chosen, but for what? What was the true nature of the treasure he had found? And what would happen next? Jack glanced around, noticing the trees now standing eerily still, their once creaking branches silent, as if they too were holding their breath. The forest seemed to have grown darker, the light of the setting sun now only a distant memory. Rex's ears perked up again, and Jack instinctively took a step closer to the dog, his instincts telling him something wasn't right. The faint glow of the crystal illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows on the ground as Jack moved forward. He wasn't sure where to go next, but he knew that staying in one place wasn't an option. The figure had said the trials were not over, that something awaited him, and with the crystal in his hand, there was no turning back. He had to face whatever came next. As Jack walked, His mind began to race with the possibilities. What did the figure mean when he said that only the worthy would survive the trials? Was he truly worthy? He didn't feel any different, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he understood about what he had uncovered. The crystal, the power it held, the secrets of the past. Jack knew that he needed answers. And that meant continuing forward, no matter what obstacles stood in his way. Rex led the way, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air, clearly alert to something Jack couldn't sense. They continued walking through the dense trees, the path narrowing with every step. The silence of the forest was almost oppressive now, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The further they went, the more the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees leaning in as if they were alive. Jack's pulse quickened. What had he uncovered? What was the key really unlocking? And why did the figure say it was dangerous? Jack's grip tightened around the crystal. He had no answers yet, but he was determined to find them. As they walked deeper into the woods, Jack noticed something different. The atmosphere had changed. The air felt heavier, as if charged with energy. The crystal in his hand began to hum again, its pulse growing stronger with each step. The symbols on the walls of the underground chamber had been only the beginning. Now, Jack could feel the true weight of the trials ahead. He had unlocked something, and the world around him was reacting to it. He wasn't sure whether he had unleashed something good or something terrible, but the forest seemed to be alive with anticipation. Just as Jack began to question whether he was walking into a trap, he heard it, a low, guttural growl. Rex froze, his body tense, his hackles raised. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He knew that sound. They weren't alone. Something was out there. Something dangerous. The growl came again, closer this time. Jack's eyes scanned the trees, but there was nothing in sight. He could feel the air growing colder, the ground beneath him trembling slightly. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. A dark shape darted between the trees, too quick to fully catch. Jack's grip on the crystal tightened. Whatever this was, it wasn't something he could fight with his fists. He needed to rely on his instincts, just like he had done before, in the heat of battle. Rex growled again, but Jack held him back with a hand on his shoulder. They couldn't afford to charge into the unknown. The growl came closer still, and Jack felt the ground shift beneath him. It was as if the earth itself was warning him. The path ahead was no longer clear, the trees closing in on either side, creating a maze of shadows. Jack swallowed hard. The forest wasn't just watching them. It was testing them. It was leading them somewhere. Somewhere he didn't know. Somewhere he might not survive. Rex barked once, sharply, and Jack felt his stomach drop. A large figure stepped out from behind a tree, its shape barely discernible in the darkness. It was tall, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light, much like the figure Jack had encountered earlier. But this creature was different. Its skin was darker, almost as if it were made of the very shadows around them. It was part of the forest, part of whatever ancient force had been awakened by Jack's discovery. "You have come far, Jack Lawson," the creature said in a voice that echoed through the trees, its words vibrating in the air. "But you are not the one who should carry the key. It is not for you to decide what happens next." Jack's heart raced, but he didn't flinch. "I didn't choose this," Jack said, his voice steady despite the fear tightening his chest. "But I'm not going to stop now. I'll face whatever comes next." The creature's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Jack felt as if the entire forest was closing in on him. The weight of the trials ahead pressed down on him, but Jack knew one thing. He had no choice but to move forward. The path was clear, and whatever this creature was, it would not stop him from uncovering the truth. The creature's eyes glowed brighter as it stepped closer, its presence pressing in on Jack like a weight too heavy to bear. It was no longer just a being of shadow, but something ancient, something that belonged to the very fabric of the forest itself. Jack felt his pulse quicken, the air growing denser with every passing second. Rex, sensing the growing danger, stood between Jack and the creature, his fur bristling, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Jack's hand tightened around the crystal, the stone still pulsing with that strange energy, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. The creature's gaze never wavered. "You cannot protect him forever," it said, its voice deep and resonant, almost like the sound of the earth itself speaking. "The power he holds will consume him." Jack's heart raced, but his resolve hardened. I don't care about the power, he said, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his chest. I want answers, and I will face whatever comes next. The creature let out a sound that might have been a laugh, though it was hard to tell. Answers? It asked, its voice dripping with something dark, something almost pitying. You believe that you can control this? You have no idea what you've stumbled upon. The key you hold, the crystal that pulses with energy, it is not a gift. It is a burden. Jack stood tall, stepping forward, though his body trembled with every movement. Then let me carry the burden, he said. I have no choice. The path has already been set. The creature seemed to consider this for a moment, its glowing eyes narrowing. It moved closer still, its form shifting and undulating, almost as if the darkness itself were bending around it. Very well, it said, its voice soft, cold. But know this. The trials you are about to face will test not only your strength, but your very soul. The forest itself will judge you. And if you are not found worthy, you will be lost forever. Jack's throat tightened, but he didn't flinch. He had come too far. This was the moment. The creature raised one long arm, pointing into the depths of the forest. The path before them seemed to stretch out endlessly, disappearing into the shadows. That is where your trial begins, it said. Follow it if you dare. But remember, everything you find, everything you learn, will come at a price. Jack nodded once, his hand still gripping the crystal, its energy coursing through him like an electric current. He turned to Rex, who stood beside him, unwavering, as if he knew this was the only way forward. Jack could feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of the situation settling over him like a cloak. This wasn't just about treasure anymore. It was about survival. It was about understanding the power that had been unlocked and what it meant for the world around him. He could feel the forest watching him, could feel the ancient power surrounding them, and he knew that this trial would not be something he could face with strength alone. It would take more than that. It would take heart. With a final glance at the creature, Jack turned and began walking down the dark path. Rex followed close behind, his eyes always scanning the shadows, his ears twitching at every sound. The deeper they went into the forest, the more the air seemed to thicken, as if the trees themselves were closing in on them. Jack felt the weight of each step as they walked, his breath growing shallow as the path grew darker. The faint glow of the crystal in his hand was the only light guiding them forward. As they pressed on, Jack began to notice strange things, symbols carved into the bark of the trees, shapes that seemed to shift as he moved past them. The forest wasn't just alive, it was watching, listening. Jack's mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. What did the crystal really mean? What was this trial, and how would he face it? But just as quickly as the questions came, they were drowned by a feeling of calm. He had made his choice. There was no turning back now. The forest seemed to hum with an energy that was almost familiar, as if Jack had been here before, or perhaps was always meant to be here. Rex's growls had faded, replaced by an uneasy silence that hung heavily in the air. The trees around them grew more twisted, their bark darkening, almost as if they were closing in on them, trapping them in the depths of the forest. Jack felt a presence moving in the shadows, just out of his sight, and for a moment, he thought he saw a figure, something flickering in and out of the darkness. It was gone before he could focus on it, but the feeling of being watched remained. The path seemed to stretch on forever, the forest never ending, and Jack knew that this journey wasn't just about finding answers. It was about facing something much deeper, something hidden in the very fabric of the land. The forest was alive, and it was judging him. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the clearing. At the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and vines, its surface cracked with age. The air was thick with energy, and Jack could feel the weight of whatever had been placed here, whatever secrets lay beneath the surface. This was it. This was where the trial would begin. Jack stepped forward, placing the glowing crystal on the altar. The moment it touched the stone, the ground shook violently, and the air was filled with a loud, resonating hum. Jack stumbled back, eyes wide in disbelief as the crystal began to pulse, its light blinding, its power building with every passing second. Rex barked loudly, his body tense as the ground beneath them trembled. Jack knew that whatever came next, he was no longer just a man on a journey. He was part of something much larger, and the path ahead was unknown. But he had made his choice, and now there was no turning back. The ground beneath Jack's feet shook violently as the crystal pulsed with an energy he could not comprehend. The air hummed with an intensity that seemed to vibrate the very fabric of the forest, and the light from the crystal grew blinding, engulfing the clearing in a luminous glow. Jack stumbled backward, the force of the energy nearly knocking him off his feet. Rex barked frantically, his body tense and his fur bristling as the ground trembled. Jack's heart raced. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure: the trials had begun. The crystal seemed to resonate with the very air around it, its light flickering as if in response to an unseen force. Jack's hands shook as he reached out, instinctively trying to steady himself against the intensity of the light. The stone altar beneath the crystal began to crack, ancient markings appearing along its surface, glowing with the same eerie light. The rumbling deepened, and a loud, low growl echoed from the depths of the earth, as though the forest itself was awakening. Jack's pulse quickened. The air was thick with a strange energy, both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The ground cracked open in front of him, revealing a hidden passage leading downward, shrouded in shadows. Jack's mind raced. Was this the next part of the trial? Was this what the figure had meant by tests of the soul, tests of worth? He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing. He had to face whatever came next. Jack took a deep breath and stepped forward, his body trembling but his resolve steady. He couldn't back down now. Rex, always by his side, followed closely, his eyes scanning the opening in the ground, sensing the danger that lurked just beyond the surface. As Jack reached the edge of the opening, the ground beneath him rumbled again, the passage widening, pulling him toward it as if the earth itself was inviting him in. Jack hesitated for only a moment before he made his decision. He wasn't alone in this. He had come too far, and whatever lay ahead, he would face it with Rex by his side. Together, they would uncover the secrets hidden deep beneath the earth. Jack's heart raced as he stepped into the darkness, the light from the crystal barely illuminating the path ahead. The passage was narrow, the walls pressing in on either side as they descended deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, heavier, and Jack felt the weight of the journey settling on him like a cloak. Every step they took seemed to echo in the silence, each footfall more deliberate than the last. The deeper they went, the more Jack could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful, lurking just beyond the veil of the darkness. The walls of the passage were covered in strange, glowing symbols, symbols that seemed to shift and change as Jack passed, their meaning slipping just beyond his grasp. It was as if the forest had its own language, its own secrets, and Jack was now a part of that language. He wasn't just a seeker of treasure anymore. He was part of something much larger. The passage finally opened into a cavernous space, the walls stretching high above them. The ground was uneven, covered in ancient stone carvings and symbols that seemed to pulse with life, responding to Jack's presence. In the center of the cavern stood a large pedestal, upon which rested an ancient book, its cover decorated with the same symbols that had appeared on the crystal and the walls. Jack approached cautiously, the air thick with the energy of the place. He reached for the book, his fingers trembling as they brushed against its surface. The moment his hand made contact, the symbols on the walls flared to life, glowing brighter than ever before. The cavern seemed to come alive, the walls vibrating with energy. Rex growled, his body tense as he stood by Jack's side, watching the book as if it were the key to something far greater. Jack slowly opened the book, its pages old and brittle, the ink faded but still legible. As he flipped through the pages, he began to read. The text spoke of an ancient order, guardians who had once protected the knowledge of the earth, the very secrets that Jack had uncovered. But it wasn't just about the knowledge. It was about the power that had been locked away for centuries, waiting for the right person to release it. Jack's heart pounded as he read the final pages of the book, which spoke of a great trial, a test of character, of heart, of soul. Only those who are pure of spirit can wield the power of the crystal, the text read, and only those who are worthy can survive the trials. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The trials were not just tests of strength or knowledge. They were tests of who he was, of what he could become. And now, he had to face them. Jack closed the book and looked around the cavern, feeling the weight of the moment settle upon him. The power of the crystal, the knowledge of the book, it was all within his reach. But with it came the responsibility. The trials would not be easy, but Jack had no choice but to move forward. With Rex at his side, he stepped into the darkness of the cavern, knowing that whatever awaited him, he would face it head-on. The trials had only just begun, and Jack was ready. In this captivating journey through the depths of mystery and discovery, our protagonist, a former soldier, embarks on an adventure that blends ancient secrets with supernatural power. Following a series of cryptic clues, Jack Lawson and his loyal dog Rex uncover a hidden treasure, only to discover it's not gold or riches, but something far more dangerous, an ancient power waiting to be unleashed. This gripping narrative, filled with twists and turns, takes you on a path where the forest itself seems alive, and trials await those brave enough to seek the truth. As Jack navigates the dangers ahead, he must face a series of tests, not of strength, but of character, heart, and soul, reflecting the very essence of the best veteran stories. In this thrilling tale, Jack finds that sometimes the greatest discoveries are not physical treasures, but revelations that test the limits of one's spirit. These veteran stories delve deep into the human soul, showing that true bravery comes not from fighting battles, but from making choices that can change the world. Through his journey, Jack learns that being worthy of such a gift requires more than survival. It requires the courage to face the unknown, as revealed in these unforgettable veteran stories. The trials ahead are dangerous, but with Rex at his side, Jack is determined to overcome whatever challenges the forest throws at him. The ancient forces that have been hidden for centuries are awakening, and only those who are truly worthy can wield the power that has been locked away for so long. As the crystal pulses with an ancient energy, Jack must decide if he is ready to face the consequences of unleashing its power, fully realizing that this story is just one of many that come from the rich tradition of veteran stories, each with their own lessons of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of truth.